Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to our March UNH Sustainability Alumni webinar. I'm Fiona Wilson, and I have the honor of serving as UNH's Chief Sustainability Officer. I'm also an affiliate faculty member at the Peter T. Paul College of Business and Economics. I'm really excited for today's conversation with some amazing UNH alumni who I will introduce momentarily. Also co-hosting with me today is my colleague, Alexis Dwyer. She's Community Engaged Sustainability Education Manager here at the Sustainability Institute, and you'll hear more from Alexis towards the end of today's webinar. We're really pleased to partner with UNH Alumni Relations to bring this year-long alumni sustainability webinar series to our community because we know that we have hundreds of alumni from across the decades who are working in sustainability-related fields and who have really deep expertise and valuable perspectives on these topics. But we also know that there are thousands more alumni who don't perhaps work in the field of sustainability, but who are keenly interested in the topic. And so we really designed these webinars to allow you to hear from UNH alums who are leading experts in sustainability across different industries and sectors. And today in each webinar, our panelists are going to be sharing some diverse perspectives on key trends that we hope will give you practical knowledge that you can use both personally and professionally. Hopefully many of you know this, but in January of this year, we announced that UNH had renewed our platinum rating in STARS. That's the acronym for the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System. It's a very rigorous, transparent reporting framework that colleges and universities use to measure our sustainability practices. We're currently one of just 8 institutions in the country to earn the highest STARS platinum rating, and actually only the only university in New England. STARS is pretty powerful because it measures sustainability across the university, from our curriculum and our research to our community engagement and our campus operations. And we're certainly really proud of this achievement. It really reflects the work and contributions of so many staff, faculty, students, alumni, and partners over almost 3 decades now. But it doesn't mean that we rest on our laurels. We're continually asking ourselves, how can we improve? And also, how can we really use this leadership in sustainability as a university to be of service to and partner with organizations, businesses, municipalities, nonprofits across the state of New Hampshire and the region? And I thought I'd just share a couple of examples from our recent STARS score that relates to the topic of today's webinar, which is supply chains. In our last STARS report, we earned 59% of total available points. That's compared to the average reporter to STARS of 49% in sort of these categories related to supply chain. So some of the points that we earned relate to the licensing of the UNH brand. UNH ensures that all goods produced bearing the UNH trademarks are done so via producers who have active memberships with the Fair Labor Association and the Workers' Rights Consortium. It also relates to our sustainable food sourcing on campus. We're one of just a few campuses that doesn't outsource our dining facilities, and that gives UNH more control over our suppliers because we run dining in-house. A few years ago, students here at UNH worked alongside my colleagues at the UNH Sustainability Institute and our partners in campus dining to secure UNH's status as a fair trade campus. UNH, with our roots as a land-grant university, we also produce some of our own food here on campus, on our campus farms. And we also have a strong commitment to purchasing from local and organic suppliers as well. And lastly, when it comes to UNH print and mail services, we're one of just a handful of campuses to be certified by the Forest Stewardship Council. So as I said, like many organizations, we're proud of some of the things we're doing, and we also have more work to do when it comes to improving our sustainable supply chain practices. And I know I'm going to get at least a few sources of inspiration from today's conversation. Before I introduce today's speakers, I just wanted to note that we're going to have plenty of time in this hour for questions from the audience. So we encourage you to put your questions for our speakers in the Zoom webinar Q&A function at any time. That will kind of get them queued up for when we go to that Q&A portion. I couldn't be more delighted to introduce 3 exceptional UNH alumni for today's conversation. Teresa McKenney, she's Director of Sustainability and Government Affairs at Nemo Equipment. Josh Austin, who is Senior Manager of Sustainability at Highliner Foods. And last but no means least, Topher Mallory, who is CEO of Mexicali Blues, and is also a member of UNH's Sustainability Advisory Board. We're so inspired and impressed by the work you're all doing and really grateful to each of you for sharing time and expertise with us today. And so I'm going to ask our speakers just to briefly share a little bit at the beginning here about their UNH connection, the story of how sustainability has been an integral part of their career path. And then they're also going to just describe for us the company that they work for, and share a very quick couple of sentences on sort of what their company's supply chain looks like. So Topher, why don't we start with you?
Good morning, or I guess good afternoon. Thank you, Fiona. Congratulations to UNH on the STARS achievement. It's amazing to listen to. I was at UNH in 2000 or I graduated from UNH in 2001 with a dual major, finance balanced with studio art. I was an early intern at the then Office of Sustainability Programs. I think that was around 99. And recently, as you mentioned, I was added to the advisory panel, which has been an incredible and inspirational environment that I look forward to more interaction with. I've only been on the panel about 6 months. I've had the privilege over the last couple of years of working across 3 different Maine-based companies. Each have unique but purpose-driven supply chains: Mexicali Blues, Royal Rose Syrups, and Split Rock Distilling. All 3 companies are independent of each other. I've been CEO of Mexicali Blues for about 20 years. It's a vertically integrated retail company that is a certified B Corp as of last year, and UNH was a big part of that journey, which was incredible, and I'm sure I'll have more opportunity to talk about. I co-founded Split Rock Distilling with a good friend nearly 10 years ago. It's a certified organic distillery making spirits from scratch. And that company led to an acquisition. So I'm a co-owner at Royal Rose Syrups, which is also a certified organic company, but it is a drink mix, specifically a non-alcohol based mix or syrup that we are making from scratch under the same roof at the distillery. And I think all 3 of these, although maybe a little confusing to listen to, and some of my answers are going to be relevant to today's conversation because they share a similarity in having very few intermediaries. So in most cases, we're working directly in our supply chain with the supplier, the farmer, the artisan, and these direct relationships with producers rather than complex multi-layered distribution networks allow us, in my opinion, to have more transparency, fair pricing, and better accountability to our supply chain. And this goes with these 3 companies too, beyond just the sourcing. The other direction are consumer relationships, for the most part, are direct or very close to direct. So with Mexicali Blues, it's retail stores and e-commerce, and with the distillery and Royal Rose, it's through a limited number of very strategic wholesale partnerships. And this gives us that same visibility, but with our customers, it really allows us to listen to the demand and allows us to bring products to market in a way that aligns with our values and ensures, for example, with Mexicali Blues, that a artisan in Nepal is paid a fair wage, or with Royal Rose, that all those ingredients have organic certificates that are current and that we are regularly checking on. And with distilling, it's been incredible to really learn that process and make the practice of producing as sustainable as possible.
Thanks, Topher. That's a great introduction, and can't wait to hear more. Teresa, why don't we go to you?
Sure, thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa McKenney, and I'm the Director of Sustainability and Government Affairs at Nemo Equipment, which is a camping gear brand. I am a UNH alum, and I went there for both undergrad and grad school. So in undergrad, I was in the Environmental Conservation and Sustainability program, did lots of great class work outside, was part of EcoQuest, which was incredible, and had internships at the National Park Service and New Hampshire State Parks. Thought I wanted to get more into the public service route. But actually, during my senior year, finishing up gen eds, I took a business course through the Paul College that had a segment from Dr. Fiona Wilson with sustainability. And I, over the years had become a little bit of an outdoor gear nerd. I really went to UNH for access to nature and was part of the outing club and lots of friends in outdoor ed and lots of days and nights up in the White Mountains. So decided to kind of combine my love of outdoors and outdoor gear and sustainability with a goal of getting into corporate sustainability in the outdoor gear industry. And I was a little early on that dream. At that point, there was only a few leaders like Patagonia and Timberland that were doing that type of work. And there were no like grad school sustainability programs either. But I stayed on at UNH through the 1-year accelerated MBA program and tried to really focus wherever I could in outdoor within that program. So I remember I did a project on Patagonia's traceable down standard. And, a few years later, I implemented the responsible down standard at Nemo. So I always kind of had that North Star and was really lucky to get my foot in the door at Nemo in 2015 when I finished grad school. So I started out in logistics and supply chain there, but even going back to my interview, was really verbal about wanting to do sustainability work. And we're a camping gear brand. We do tents, sleeping bags, sleeping pads, camp furniture, and carry systems like backpacks and duffel bags. Some of our customers are REI, LL Bean, but we also have a really strong network of independent retailers like Kittery Trading Post and international as well. So Japan is a big market for us, Australia, Europe. So we're a global brand. We have a lot of recognition in our little niche of the world. We're the #1 best-selling specialty camp brand in North America last year, but we don't do apparel, so we don't necessarily have that same like name brand recognition as like a North Face, for example. We're a team of about 50 people. We're right above Lickies and Chewies, candy and ice cream, which is really dangerous in Dover. And we have a ton of fun designing innovative gear. For our supply chain, we have a pretty wide variety of products that I just listed that have very different individual unique supply chains. Our vendor partners are primarily in Asia, and we work directly with what we call tier 1 cut-sew partners, some of whom we've worked with for 15, 20 years, who've done a lot of work on sustainability as well. And then we also get down deeper for materials like textiles, working with tier 2 mills directly on developing textiles, and things like aluminum for tent poles. So that's our supply chain and my connection to UNH.
Great. Thanks so much, Teresa. Looking forward to digging in a little bit more on some of that. And last but not least, Josh, love to hear a little bit more about you and Highliner and what you're doing there on your supply chain side.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. So I'm the Senior Manager of Sustainability at Highliner Foods. So we're a frozen seafood company. We're right down the street in Portsmouth. I graduated from UNH in 2005 with a BA in International Economics. One of my last business classes that I took, we actually had the CEO of Timberland come in and talk to us about sustainability. And that's really where my passion for sustainability started. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in my career, but I knew that I had an interest in sustainability. Through a fairly fortuitous bike ride, I met someone that worked at Timberland, found my way into the ranks of the Timberland company, and had the opportunity to work on various sustainability projects, philanthropy projects while I was there, and really kind of reinforcing that passion that I had for sustainability. Went from Timberland over to the toy industry with Hasbro on the marketing side, but again, still having that ability to have some participation in some of the sustainability work that Hasbro was doing. And it was around that time when I decided that instead of kind of dabbling in sustainability as part of my work, kind of on the side, I really wanted to focus 100% on sustainability. I wanted to blend that passion with my career. And so that's what really led me to Highliner Foods. So one, just being a food company, I felt like if I was going to practice sustainability, a food company is the right place to do it. It's nutrition that we need to live healthy lives. And really the work that Highliner was doing in sustainability, I felt was really important. And so at Highliner Foods, Again, we are a frozen seafood company. We're one of the leading frozen seafood companies in North America. We currently purchase seafood from all over the world, Bering Sea, Barents Sea, South America, Southeast Asia. It's caught or farmed, and then it's processed typically in Asia and then sent over to North America, where we sell it as just a commodity seafood, or we value add it. We add breaders, batters, different types of coatings, and we sell it into the retail space and the food service space. So if you think restaurants, cafeterias, those types of areas where people are consuming food. Now, when I say that we're purchasing seafood from around the world, it didn't always used to be that way. So Highliner Foods was founded 125 years ago. And up until the late 1990s, we were actually a vertically integrated company. So we had our own fishing fleet out of Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. We were fishing for cod, haddock, and catching all the fish that we needed for our operations. But overfishing, climate change, really led to the depletion of the fisheries that we relied on for our fishing fleet. And it actually led to Canada closing down the fishing grounds in 1992. And so it really required Highliner Foods to think about, what do we do differently in the future? You know, if we can't catch fish, what are we going to do? And so we had to really make a massive change to our operations and start being an importer of seafood rather than a fisher of seafood. And so we transformed our business, but then it also gave us a new mindset of the importance of sustainability. Because when you think about, well, often you think about sustainability as being just the right thing to do, a good thing to do. It's inherently good for the environment. People appreciate it. But it's also proved to Highliner Foods that sustainability is incredibly important just to the continuity of our business. Because if we are not managing the fish stocks that we rely on for our business, we have no business at the end of the day. And so it proved to us that it's important for us to invest in sustainability. And we continue to do that work today. So we've expanded from just looking at specifically the management of fisheries to social compliance, social justice, making sure workers' human rights are protected within the supply chain, reducing food waste, managing our carbon footprint, and a broad range of other issues that I'm excited to work on, and I feel make a huge impact, not just to our communities, to the people, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the good thing to do for our company. And so we're doing good while doing well, and I think that's really important, and that's something that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Josh. So we want to dig a little bit deeper into some of the things that you've all been talking about, and with the speakers' permissions, we're going to do a quick lightning round just to get things sort of kicked off, and then we'll dig a little deeper. But so the first lightning round question, this is just a yes or no answer from each of you. So when you think, with the topic of today's webinar is really around, can corporate supply chains kind of change the world, right? So when we think about the balance between economic growth, which is something that is of interest to all of us, whether we're thinking about, individual organizations, companies, or our kind of global economies. So when we think about that balance between economic growth and sustainable consumption, is there an inherent conflict? Yes or no? So Josh, let's start with you because you just spoke.
Yes.
Topher.
Yes.
Teresa.
Yes.
All right, next question, also yes or no. By their very nature, can supply chains, we're obviously sourcing stuff, right? We're using materials and ingredients from all over the world. By their very nature, can supply chains ever truly be sustainable? Yes or no? Teresa.
Yes.
Topher.
No.
Josh.
Yes.
All right, interesting. Like the difference there. When you think of the greatest tension or challenge within your supply chain, what is it in one sentence? Topher.
Scaling up without losing the direct relationships that make our supply chains and our estimation as fair and transparent and resilient as possible. This has been an Achilles heel for a long time that we've known about.
Great, love it. Long sentence, but a really good one. Love it. Josh, what's your one sentence?
Uh, Trust and transparency in the far reaches of the supply chain that we don't necessarily see in tier one suppliers.
Yeah, so the complexity of your supply chain and just how many layers and tiers there are. Yeah, great. Thank you. Teresa.
Uncertainty and confusing signals from governments and customers.
Aha, yes. And then last kind of lightning round question again, one sentence from each of you. When you think about your supply chain, what is the greatest opportunity that you see ahead? Josh.
Customers pushing us to do more and pushing our board of directors to recognize that it's important to do even more than we are now.
Oh, yeah, really great. Teresa.
Electrification of our tier two, specifically heat and the transition to renewable electricity.
And then Topher.
Back to those direct supplier relationships, pushing even greater sustainability and impact within them, whether that's living wages, organic certifications, reducing waste, those types of things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, let's dig in a little bit deeper. So, I think discussing sustainability within supply chains, and when we talk about sustainability in supply chains, we're talking about really kind of two things, right? We're talking about sort of the planet aspect of supply chains. What's the environmental impact, sort of positive or negative in supply chains? And then, but we're also talking about the people aspect, right? How do we make sure that, supply chains are sort of good for the human beings, and having a positive impact on those human beings in those supply chains. But I think those conversations can often be challenging in the context of business. As some of those decisions that can have a positive benefit on people or planet, sometimes, but not always, have an additional cost. Sometimes it's an upfront cost, sometimes it's an ongoing kind of variable cost. How do you sort of approach those decisions and conversations in your own organizations? And I think, Josh, I'm going to start with you because you kind of referenced that in one of your opening statements about the sort of the business benefit of sustainability in your supply chain. So I'd love just to hear how you think about that.
So I think that continues to be a constant challenge, is trying to provide the return on investment for sustainability. In some areas, it's really easy when we talk about supporting best management practices for fisheries. That's a pretty easy line to draw between our business and the success of our business and investing in those different projects that provide those best practices. But when it comes to something like climate change, there's a line there, but it's not quite as direct as it would be with fisheries. And so it's really trying to define exactly what is the tangible and intangible benefits of those different projects that we're taking on. I think in some regard, and when I bring up the push or emphasis that our customers and consumers have on sustainability, that's what helps me to talk to my leadership team about, here's the value. We have a customer that's pushing on us and we have this X amount of business with the customer. They want us to take action in, whether it be social justice, climate change, whatever the case may be. And it's trying to help my leadership team see that there's a benefit because this customer is pressing on us for it. And so while it's, I wish we were doing things because it's inherently good, we are a business. We are in business to make a profit. Without profit, we're not a business. And so it's trying to show how the work in sustainability helps us to maintain or grow the bottom line in the years to come. And so it continues to be a challenge. It's looking at each different project or each different type of sustainability topic in a unique way to define who are the stakeholders and what is the value that those stakeholders see, and how do we draw that line between the value that they see and the business that we have.
Yeah, so interesting, right? I mean, then, generational trends are very clear on this, right? Gen Z, Gen Alpha that's coming behind them. I mean, they are disproportionately generations that, really want to buy from and work for and invest in companies and products that they see as aligned with their values. And I think you're starting to see that in your business. And so I think kind of inherently in what you were saying, you're talking about this is a way that that highlighting differentiates itself to consumers.
Yes,
By being
absolutely.
more,
Yeah.
by being more sustainable.
When we talk to consumers, sustainability is always one of the first priority topics that we talk about, because it is a differentiating factor, and we make sure that we use it. We're doing good for the planet, or doing good for communities, but we talk about that story because it does help us with our customers.
Yeah, Topher, like on this conversation around, sort of the balance between sort of people, planet, and profit. Do you agree with Josh? Do you have a different perspective?
I agree. Is this a one-word answer?
You can do more if you want, but if it's a one-word answer, that's good.
I agree.
Teresa, anything additionally you want to say on this question?
Sorry, my computer is being spicy now that I'm having an important moment where it needs to work, right? I think that I totally agree with Josh. I think that we as sustainability professionals just need to start being a little more aggressive here sometimes, at least in like the outdoor industry perspective. And, working at a for-profit business spends money on things. They spend money on all sorts of things. There are costs involved with running a successful business. And I've started to kind of lean on that more in my arguments for getting for funding for things. And I use in the outdoor world trade shows as an example of that, where we used to pre-pandemic have 2 to 3 trade shows a year where all the brands that you see in REI would come together to kind of toot their new stuff, have meetings, and of course do business. But brands would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, up to millions annually if you're a big brand on those shows. And it was just a cost of doing business. And I think that sustainability attributes are becoming increasingly important, and a cost of doing business, whether it's a customer requirement or ask, as Josh alluded to, or increasingly regulatory changes. So it's part of doing business now. And while it's uncomfortable to have conversations about the costs, I think over the years I've trended more in this is something we need to do if we want to survive as a company, as a compelling argument to consider sustainability among all the other things you consider when you're designing a product, whether it's the color, the material, the margin, just fighting to have that, like, maybe not equal, but on the same board, is instead of like a separate thing to consider as a company.
Yeah, really interesting. Just a reminder for everyone, if you have questions for our panelists, we'll be going to audience Q&A in just 5 minutes or so. So please be putting your questions in there. Josh, I wanted to come to you. I know that, while competition, right, is kind of the way we were taught business in business school, right? The models of business strategy are all inherently, at least the old models are all about competition. And how do we compete and outperform, our peers in the same industry? But I think when we think about sort of sustainability within supply chains, collaboration is often proving to be much more powerful. So in your opinion, how does collaboration amplify, impact, and create additional value in the supply chain, within and across industries? And if you can give any examples of collaboration within your industry, I think would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think collaboration is critical if we want to make big impacts. Lots of the changes or lots of the concerns or challenges that we're trying to tackle, High Liner Foods can't do it alone. Like, we're large in the relative to other seafood companies, but we're not large enough to make kind of go by ourselves and make these huge inroads on anything like, responsibly managed fisheries, climate change, some different social justice aspects. It requires larger or a louder voice, and collaboration really helps to make that voice louder, pull resources together to create the impacts that you're trying to make. We started back in 2007. High Liner Foods helped to found the very first fishery improvement project, which is essentially a group of different organizations within the seafood industry that come together pretty competitively to help to regenerate a specific specific fisheries. So I noted before there was the closure of the cod fishery off of Atlanta, Canada. And so Highliner came in with other seafood suppliers. We put in place this fishery improvement project, and now there's going to be a commercial fishery in that cod fishery for the first time in over 20 years. And it's because of the work that was done with those partners. And so I think the partnerships are incredibly important because again, the tackles are just too big for us to, or the challenges are just too big for us to tackle alone. One thing that we're working on right now is looking at the feed that's given to shrimp. So most of the shrimp that people consume is aquaculture, farm shrimp, and the shrimp are fed, in large part, soy derivatives. And so Highliner Foods can't necessarily go in alone to all of the shrimp farming countries to say you have to use deforestation and conversion-free food. But if we band together with other shrimp suppliers, we have now a much louder voice. We have much bigger buying power. We have a lot more resources behind us to force those different countries to change their policies on importing soy that comes from deforestation and conversion-free sources. And so that's just like an example of something that we're working on right now that's really exciting, but it couldn't be done by Highliner Foods alone.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Topher. And sorry, Topher, Josh. Yeah, and you mentioned you were at Timberland before. And Timberland was also a company that really did a lot of collaboration around supply chains. So it's interesting to see that work. You're continuing that work here at Highliner, which is great. Topher, I wanted to come to you. You were an outlier. You were an outlier when we did that lightning round about, can supply chains ever be truly sustainable? And you said no. So I'd love to hear a little bit about why you said no, but also I wanted to ask you a question about the idea of circular economies and sort of what we're calling circular supply chains. It's an increasingly big topic right now. Can you share examples of the projects that you've gotten to work on at your company or your companies that make you the most excited and hopeful for where your industry and our society can head in the future?
Absolutely. And I'll start with a no first because I was thinking I would launch into a sentence and I just went with the no. But I think about that supply chain piece really is just continuous improvement. So for me, the companies I run are very small. They're under 100 people. And sometimes there is a shiny object or a better way of doing it that's just out of our feasibility, whether that's financially or geographically or what have you. So I think the mindset is one of we can always do it better. We can continuously improve, and also being the smallest component of a supply chain in many cases makes it really hard for us to push on larger parts of our supply chain. We can shift, but it's really hard to demand that a container is on a specific kind of vessel from Mexicali, or that maybe at Split Rock, part of our fermentation, something like our yeast that's cultured at a massive company, is going to be held to a certain standard. So I think that's where my no comes from. Onto circular and full circle ideas or economies. One of the more fun examples was early on, speaking of a small company, when Split Rock was just 3 people, myself, Matt Page, that I founded it with, and our first employee. And we were primarily making bourbon. That was what inspired us to open the distillery. It's a 4-grain spirit. So we, on a weekly basis, we're dealing with about 4,000 pounds collectively of corn, wheat, barley, and rye, all organic, all sourced in New England. We were really excited about the quality of the product. And what we quickly noticed was we had an incredible byproduct that at first, the incredible part was just how much of it there was. There was 4,000 pounds of those grains suspended in water, which made it even more challenging. So we had thousands upon thousands of pounds of this. And all we had done was take starch and convert it to sugar and then make it into alcohol and remove that. So all the beautiful and nutrient-rich aspects of these organic grains were still intact. And instead of discarding it like we had seen done in so many of the distilleries that we had worked in or had been around, we tried to early on, before we even started, partner with the farms that we got it from, which unfortunately weren't interested in a little further away geographically. We found a couple local farms that were organic and had livestock. We worked with MAFCA, our Maine-based certifier for our USDA organic certification, and they were able to get us into a program for organic agricultural feed. So we're ensuring every every batch of spent grain carried all of the organic certifications, and we um, have to date 100% of that being used for livestock feed, which has been incredible. And early on, a local restaurant took this one step further. They had an old fashioned that was with our bourbon garnished with bacon from that farm, and they called it the full circle old fashioned, which it's a really fun example of how a business can close the loop. I'm not suggesting an old fashioned is our crowning achievement, but we're really proud of that 100%. And it's not just for Split Rock. Now, 100% of Royal Rose from about the time we bought it. It took us a little longer, maybe the first year, but 100% of our grain, fruit, and botanical use, all of our downstream, maybe waste to somebody, is now being repurposed for either that agricultural food or for compost. So I think it's a really cool example of thinking beyond the end of a product or the end of a life cycle. And it's the stuff that just gets me excited with being an entrepreneur. I mean, you really can prove that something like a circular economy is not just theoretical, it actually works. It lowered cost for these farms. It's gotten more farms interested, so much so that we don't really have enough waste stream or repurposing for everybody. But this shift in mindset's been an incredible benefit and something neat to be a part of.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that story. I'm looking forward to enjoying one of those cocktails with you at some point soon. um, I'm going to switch us to Q&A for a little bit. I have some more questions for the speakers shortly, but I think we've got some nice questions coming in from the audience, and so I'd love to switch to that. There's a question here from Greg Jansen. Thanks for being with us, Greg. Also a Sustainability Advisory Board member. He has a question for all three of you. You and your companies are leaders in sustainability. What's the low-hanging / innovative strategies that the average company can use to enhance sustainability in their supply chains? Teresa, do you want to maybe take the lead on answering that one?
Yeah, I think, it comes to mind words. I have two things that I attribute to really accelerating sustainability work in the outdoor industry in the past 5-10 years. One is a state law in California about PFAS in textiles that magically waved a wand and made all of us figure out our situations very quickly. And the other one is a document from REI called the REI Product Impact Standards. And I think that for us, we were also kind of new to this work when REI launched that in, I think, 2016. And it gave us kind of goals to work towards. So every year their standards have ratcheted up in intensity. So at first, maybe the standard was, do you measure your greenhouse gas footprint? And now, almost 10 years later, their most recent set of standards requires any brand selling to REI to not only measure their footprint, but to have a target and to make progress on it, or they get fined, right? So I think that for us, having our biggest customer transparently have a list of things we needed to do helped us to focus. So I would just recommend for any company, look in your industry, see if there is kind of either an industry group with recommendations, or ideally one of your customers that has a list of things that maybe are low-hanging fruit, but are actually a pretty big deal, like having a manufacturing code of conduct, having a chemicals management program, and restricted substance lists. And just start there, because those are actually really big lifts, but they're foundational for work in the consumer goods industry for sustainability.
Yeah, such a good point. And it's, and it's aligned with the future success of your business, right? It's not just gratuitous action. It's that if you want to continue to sell through REI, you're going to be required to do these things. So you're sort of future-proofing your business. I love that. Yeah. And I think you also highlighted, the importance of public policy, right? This California law around PFAS kind of really was a game changer in making the outdoor industry really think about, the use of that forever chemical and, primarily for waterproofing, and how can you do that in a different way? So that's really interesting. Josh, Topher, how would you answer Greg's question?
I'd love to jump in and just piggyback onto what Teresa said, because for us, the low-hanging fruit at all of these companies was actually not what I thought it would be, and that was in the certifications. So Mexicali, I think it had been in our DNA for a long, long time, maybe from day one. And we put off to some extent the B Corp certification because we wanted to pass right out of it, right out of the gate or from the start. And it was intriguing once we got rolling with it. We learned so much. We're so inspired from the list, from the hard work of all these other companies, and from the supportive group here in Maine and beyond with um, the B Corp community. And within Split Rock and Royal Rose, I'd say the same about the organic certifications. They felt very intimidating. We were using organic ingredients, and once we started the process, noticed again, even if we hadn't attained the organic certification for a product, I truly believe MOFGA would have kept rooting us on the same way the B Corp community said from day one, even if you don't get the certification, we're rooting you on, we want to help you. And they're certainly regulatory in some way, shape, or form, but I think they're really supportive and inspiring and are a big part of an easy roadmap for most companies, one that I wouldn't necessarily have looked at first.
Yeah. So interesting. You meant, talking about B Corp specifically, Topher. I know you're really proud as a company to be a B Corp, and curious to hear if, being a B Corp, what impact that has had. I know it's only about 6 months ago that you certified for the first time, but curious about what impact that's having on your business. And also just want to note that, as starting in 2026, one of the new B Corp standards, to your point, Teresa, about REI having kind of a set of criteria, all B Corps starting in 2026 will measuring and reporting their greenhouse gas emissions, having a really clear action plan to reduce them is going to be required of all B Corps. So, but Topher, tell us a little bit about, how being a B Corp, how that has affected your business.
Sure. First and foremost was the awesome opportunity to educate our entire team. So we're just over 100 people, and there were a handful that knew. And to me, one of the bigger surprises along the way was from local banks we're partnered with through our staff and onto a lot of our supply chain. Very few people knew what a B Corp was. There was confusion within the actual B Corp piece, registering as a B Corp, the B Corp certification, and the rigorous process and upholding of these standards. But again, I think for us, we have from day one had this in our DNA, the Erskine family back in 1988 when they started. It was very much about these intentional relationships. Pete always said he only did business with people if they were smiling. And now we use Google Translate and all sorts of agreements and a supplier code of conduct that is evolving with every purchase, because we are only 6 months into this new certification. It's been about a 2-year road from starting to today. And I'm not sure I perfectly answered that, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great. Josh, how would you answer Greg's question? Just briefly, and then we'll jump to some other questions we've got in the.
Yeah, so I think engaging stakeholders and starting with policies, I think is a really good way. So tackling on to what Teresa said, but I think also just being really specific, because I think when you talk about sustainability, there's so much that you could do. I mean, there's what one person considers to be sustainable versus another person can be different, many ways to look at it. So figure out the impact that you want to make and try to be laser focused on that. or those couple impacts that you want to make, because it's really easy to spread your resources out and then you're not making an impact. To me, it's much better to try and at first be focused, tackle the impacts, make the impacts that you want to make, and slowly expand from there.
Yeah, really good advice. There's sort of a related question from Ethan Chadbourne as well, which is around, and I'll combine the two questions, I think. One is around, what is your stakeholder engagement philosophy and method? And also, what supplier traceability systems do you use in your businesses?
Yeah, so we conducted a formal stakeholder materiality assessment back in 2021, and we're doing another one soon. And so that's
Josh, could you just say for people who may not
Yeah.
know what a materiality assessment is, just kind of just give
Yeah,
the
so it's essentially a
101.
survey when you go out to you identify the stakeholders that you want to go out to. So, could be employees, investors, suppliers, customers, broad range of people, trying to understand from them which sustainability topics are important to them, what types of impacts are they looking for your organization to make, and then you're able to kind of cross-reference that versus has the greatest impact on your organization, and that helps to prioritize or identify prioritization of certain sustainability topics. And so that's kind of a formalized way to go about it. But even once you've done that, it's important just to continue to talk to your stakeholders, listen to your stakeholders to understand, like, how are their expectations changing? Typically when you do a materiality assessment, I think best practice is to update it every 3 or 4 years, just so you can maintain that awareness. But I think, anytime you're able to engage with your stakeholders, listen to them on their thoughts of sustainability. So I think that's important. In terms of traceability, on the seafood side, 98% of our seafood is certified by an eco certification, and those are all chain of custody certifications. So it goes back from Highliner Foods all the way back to where the fish was harvested, whether it be wild caught or farmed. And so we know where that specific lot of fish came from and all of the different stages in the supply chain that it's gone through. And so we're able to trace that back, and that's really important for our customers to have trust in the products that we have. So that's how we handle it, but I think other industries handle it in different ways.
Yeah, Teresa, Topher, on that question of traceability and stakeholder
Yeah, I
engagement.
think the textile space is interesting because to date we've been way less regulated than food and bev. And I think we actually have a lot to learn, and I have a to-do to follow up with Josh and Topher as well, because we do have traceability and certification schemes for NEMO. We're certified to the Responsible Down standard. So we have 100% RDS certified down feathers in our sleeping bags. That certification scheme ensures that there's no live plucking or force feeding in the supply chain. Down feathers are actually a waste product of the fowl food industry. But that is a certification scheme that is largely built on PDFs. And as we're trying to scale and get increasing traceability in our supply chain, especially for laws like the Uyghur Forced Labor Act, that's been really impactful for materials like cotton. Essentially, you have to prove that any cotton in your supply chain did not come from a certain region of China. Has become really tricky to scale, even at a small to medium-sized enterprise like Nemo, never mind big, huge companies, and is a real pain point for the textile world right now. But another great certification that I love in our supply chain is called Blue Sign, which is a chemicals management program. And Blue Sign materials and products are made with the highest level of chemicals integrity and has traceability all the way back to the formulation of that chemical in the supply chain. So we're at an interesting moment where now laws are starting to pop up that are mandating that we do these things. And we have kind of, at least in my world, not my world, but the outdoor industry, call it fashion, to have sort of like a stick and gum, like House of Cards approach to it, where I think that we really need to learn from our friends that have been way more highly regulated than us in the past so we can scale the work.
Yeah, that's great. Topher, anything to add on this question of traceability or stakeholder engagement?
Yes and no. I'm over here frantically taking notes. I'm looking forward to following up with Josh on assessment. We have done informal surveys leading into B Corp Cert and feel like we understand our stakeholders, but are looking to really granularly and specifically start asking questions. And with food and bev, there is so much. I'm looking forward to understanding Blue Sign better. One of our current projects at Mexicali that's coming hopefully to maybe not a close, it'll be ongoing, but we've transitioned our entire tech stack. We had a singular point of sale that we'd outgrown and we're using to, without getting into the weeds, like adding miscellaneous field after miscellaneous field to keep track of everything. And now we have a robust enterprise ERP that we think we have the data and are now looking for help and support in how to be accountable for where did the fabric come from and which garments was it in. And yeah, so we're, I think, at chapter 1.
Yeah, and it's I think I just want to reference something you said earlier, Topher, about one of your biggest challenges is about how do you sort of scale but continue to do this with integrity. And I think Teresa just kind of highlighted that tension between scale and doing these things really, really well. Let's just do one other quick question. Sam Gobil. Sam's a recent graduate of UNH, and he's now working in the field of sustainability. So I think his question is really about some things that he would love to learn from each of you. What is a specific sustainability goal that you have had trouble completing in your current role, and how did you overcome that, or what are you planning to do in the future? Anybody feel super passionate about answering that question?
Yeah, I'll
Go for it, Josh. Yeah, that'd be great.
So we in 2022 we adopted our first climate action goal, so reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and probably like any other organization that has tackled this, it's easy to create a goal. It's much harder to decide how you're going to achieve that goal. When you're talking about trying to reduce electricity, particularly when you're a frozen seafood company that requires freezer capabilities that consume a lot of electricity, it's really difficult to identify how you're going to do that, meet those different reductions. And it's also very capital expense intensive. And so that's been a real challenge for me in trying to define, goes back to the question earlier, what's the return on investment? What is this going to do for our business if we invest the money to achieve these different goals? So that's a massive challenge for us. I think it's going to be a massive challenge for all of the other organizations that are either committing to net zero or other types of near-term greenhouse gas reduction goals.
Right. Well, I think I'm just going to do one last lightning round, and then I will hand over to my colleague Alexis. But I wanted just to ask you in closing, as we think about sustainable supply chains, what's one key thought in just a sentence or two that you want to share with the audience as you leave them today? Teresa, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think especially for just customers, is to ask questions and to really, I value certifications when I'm looking at a packaging making a claim. I think that'll change in the next couple of years with more stringent claims laws. But in my opinion, you've heard a lot about certifications across the board today. I think that it's a way for both companies to make progress and consumers to feel confident in what they're buying.
Well, yeah, ask questions, do the research. Yeah, great. Josh.
Spend dollars in line with your values. So if you're a consumer and sustainability is important to you, find the brands that are practicing the sustainability values that matter to you.
Yeah, great advice. And Topher, last but not least.
Just jotted down 2 points, and Josh, you just articulated one perfectly. Voting is certainly an important part of life, and every dollar is a vote. So vote for the things you want to see more of and believe in. And for those that are in the sustainability realm. I am so excited for you. I was not, I feel like, here out of the get-go, and so much of it has been learned at work. And the one thing that I have learned time and time again is why I answered no, and that is that the work is never done. You can always improve on it, even if you get shut down, whether it's financially or by a decision maker. You just have got to keep trying to um, trying to prove that it is of value, and doing good and profit are not separate. And I really do think that they can converge and can be an advantage for companies.
Yeah, so well said, Topher. And I think that really speaks to, the value of community, right? That's part of why we're doing these webinars, to help everyone learn from each other and collaborate. I love the fact that, Teresa and Josh and Topher, there's things that you've written down today that you want to follow up with each of the speakers on. That's fantastic. We love having that kind of vibrant sustainability community built around UNH alumni. But I also think this sort of the idea of community, right, in these moments, about how do we keep having that courage and that tenacity, as you say, Tova, to keep doing the right thing. I think surrounding yourself by people and companies that are doing this work is just so important. And I just want to say, a huge thank you to each of you. And I'm just going to actually, Jana Petrakova, who's one of the participants in the audience, she just sent me a note. She just said, "Thanks for putting together such passionate people. It was a highlight of my day, listening to all of the inspiring stories and learning about the impact you're all making at the local and global level as well. Thank you so much for this webinar." So, using Jana's words to thank you all, thank you so much, Josh and Teresa and Topher. We are so grateful to have you as alumni and engaged in the work at UNH, and so inspired by all the work that you do. So with that, I will hand over to my colleague, Alexis Dwyer, to share some closing thoughts here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you so much to our panelists. Incredible conversation. Hello to all of our amazing attendees. As Fiona mentioned, I'm Alexis Dwyer. I'm the Community Engaged Sustainability Education Manager here at the UNH Sustainability Institute, and we're so delighted that you joined us today. And of course, we would love to keep connected with you. You can see some different ways we've listed. I know the slides will get back up, but we've listed some different ways on the slides to get involved. And if anything piques your interest, especially thinking about the Be Impact Clinic that I know Topher and Mexicali Blues went through, or the Climate Action Clinic, or perhaps you have an interest in coming back to campus to speak with students to share your experience, definitely please reach out to me. And of course, we hope that you attend our future UNHSI events. And if you are a UNH alum, we'd love to have you join our LinkedIn group, which if you go on LinkedIn, all you need to do is search for UNH Sustainability Alumni, and you'll find it, and then request to be a part of the group, and we'll approve. But thank you all so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.